My second informative speech is on the history of the cell phone. And the purpose of this particular speech is to inform my peers of the history and innovation behind the inception of the cell phone. And I believe that this is very important because the use of the cell phone is second nature to those in modern times. And this speech is an instrument in which my peers can be notified of the history behind the cell phone. I will start off by giving information regarding the brilliant minds that paved the way for the invention of the cell phone. First of all, the first person to mention would be Samuel Morse. Who in 1832 was the inventor of the electromagnetic telegraph. 10 years later, in 1842, he conceived of wireless conduction, and to put it quite simply, that was the first device to electronically send messages. The second great mind that contributed to the invention of the cell phone would be Michael Faraday. He was a skilled analytical chemist, and he used space and electrical conduction in 1843. And he basically expanded upon the ideas of Morse. Third of all would be James Clerk Maxwell, who he wrote a book called The Dynamical Theory of the Electromagnetic Field. And essentially the paper proposed that light, electricity, and magnetism were all related and part of the same phenomenon. He also made the discovery that electromagnetic phenomenon traveled in waves. Now, sometime later in 1946, that was the inception of the first official mobile phone, and it was utilized by the Swiss police, and it utilized two-way technology. This is an advertisement for something very similar. I think the Chicago policemen used this in the 1940s and 50s. It wasn't very practical though, because after 6 phone uses, you'd completely drain the battery from your car. Now, sometime later in the early 70s, an inventor by the name of Martin Cooper, who was widely known as the father of the cell phone, he started working for Motorola, and his specialty was handheld technology. And let me see here. He worked for the Motorola company designing handheld products, including the first portable handheld radio. And he was the creator of the first functional prototype of a cell phone called the Dynatec. The Motorola Dynatec 8000X, this is the very first cell phone ever mass-produced. It was a fundamental technological shift for the time. It was first commercially used in 1983, and the initial cost for it was $3,500. And at the time, it was called the Brick because of its size. And at the time, it was considered lightweight, and it weighed 28 ounces. And the dimensions of it was 13 inches by 1.75 inches by 3.5 inches. Okay, from the inception of the Dynatec, when you talk about cell phones, there's 3 separate generations that you talk about. The first generation is from 1983 up until the 90s. And within this time, the popularity of the cell phone skyrocketed. But at the time, most cell phones were not handheld. They had to be permanently installed in your car. And actually, for a long while, cell phones were more referred to as car phones than cell phones or mobile phones. Second generation covers the early 90s up until the late 90s. This was a time of great innovation. Around this time, digital mobile phone networks started to become available, especially in the US and Europe. Also, the technology changed. There was a digital circuit switched transmission inside of the cell phones, which enabled quicker network signaling and a lower amount of drop calls and a increased call quality. It also ushered in a smaller design, and from here on out, cell phones became handheld and portable. Okay, now the third generation covers the early 2000s up until now. And to be honest, we've had the biggest, the largest increase in technological advancement when it comes to cell phones the last 4 to 5 years. There's been an increase in bits and max data. Most typical phones have 2 megabytes of max data indoors, and outdoors they have 384 kilobits for outdoor use. And obviously the third generation phones have different applications on it, such as texting, email, MP3s, and internet access. And to conclude my speech, the cell phone has become an integral part of the modern world. And with that said, you can't undervalue the contributions the aforementioned people I talked about contributed, paving the way for what we have now.